We're getting into a topic now: marriage and the Bible. In a small sense, this is what I have from marriage in the Bible, and I'm going to collect some info on it. Marriage, the union of a man and a woman as a husband and wife, which becomes the foundation for a home and family. Origin of marriage. Marriage was instituted by God when he declared, "It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper comparable to him." So God fashioned woman and brought her to man. On seeing the woman, Adam exclaimed, "This now is the bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man." This passage also emphasizes the truth that a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Genesis 2:24. This suggests that God's ideal is for a man to be the husband of one wife and for the marriage to be permanent. Legislation. God's desire for his people was that they marry within the body of believers. The Mosaic law clearly stated that an Israelite was never to marry a Canaanite. The Israelite would be constantly tempted to embrace the spouse's God as well. Exodus 34:10-17, Deuteronomy 3-4. Likewise, the Apostle Paul commanded the members of the church at Corinth, "Do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers." Corinthians 6:14. Marriages between Israelites were directed by law, and all incestuous relationships were outlawed. There's a lot of quotation. In addition, priests were forbidden to marry prostitutes and divorced women. Priests. Daughters who inherited their father's possession had to marry within their tribe or lose their inheritance. Wow, that's interesting. Choosing the bride. In Old Testament times, the parents chose the mate for their son. The primary reason for this was that the bride became part of the clan. Although they were married and became one flesh, the couple remained under the authority of the bridegroom's father. The parents chose someone who would best fit into their clan and work harmoniously within the mother-in-law and sisters-in-law. Sometimes the parents consulted with the children to see if they approved of the choice of the mates being made for them. For example, Rebekah was asked if she wanted to marry Isaac. Samson demanded that a certain girl be acquired for him, although his parents protested. They completed the marriage contract for Samson. That was in Judges 14:1-4. Frequently, people married at a young age, a fact which made the parents' choice a practical matter. Well, yeah, you're getting married at a young age. Parents would have more of a choice. They have a choice in everything, like if you're 12 or 13. So, yes. In New Testament times, the Jewish leaders had decided to establish minimum ages for marriage to contract to be drawn up. The age was set at 13 for boys and 12 for girls. Even if the young wife lost her husband in war or accident, she remained with the clan and was wed to her brother-in-law or next of kin. This arrangement is known as the Levirate marriage. It is the basis for the story of Ruth and Boaz. It's in Deuteronomy and Ruth. Concept of love. Although romance marriage was unknown in the Old Testament times, it played a minor role in the life of teenagers of that era. They did not marry the person they loved the mate they married. Love began at marriage. When Isaac married Rebekah, the Bible records that she became his wife and he loved her. Genesis 24:67. Marriage customs. A number of customs and steps were involved in finalizing marriage in Old Testament times. The first was agreeing on a price to be given to the father of the girl. The payment was compensation for the loss of a worker and a daughter. The sum was mutually agreed upon. Genesis 34:12, Exodus 22:16-17. It could consist of services instead of money. For example, Jacob agreed to work for 7 years for Rachel. Genesis 29:18-20. The giving and receiving of money was probably accompanied by a written agreement. After this agreement was made, the couple was considered engaged. In biblical times, a betrothal for marriage was a binding agreement that set young women apart for the young man. The agreement was voided only by death or divorce. One could not get out of the betrothal in any other way. Whether Joseph discovered that Mary was pregnant, he did not want to make a public example of her. Instead, he decided to divorce her secretly. However, he did not carry out the divorce because an angel of the Lord convinced him that the baby to be born to Mary would be the Son of God. Matthew 1:18-25. During the engagement period, the bridegroom had certain privileges. If war was declared, he was exempt from military duty. Deuteronomy 27. He also knew that the bride was to be protected by Mosaic law. If another man raped her, the act was treated as adultery, and the offender was to be punished accordingly. Deuteronomy 20-23-27. This considered a more serious crime than rape of a girl had not yet betrothed. Deuteronomy 22-28-29. The length of engagement varied. Sometimes the couple was married the same day they were engaged. Usually, however, a period of time elapsed. During this time, a young man prepared place in his father's house for his bride, while the bride prepared herself for her married life. On the day of the wedding, the groom and his friends dressed in their finest clothes and went to the home of the bride. Together, the couple went back to the groom's house. Their friends sang and danced their way back to his house. So that's kind of cool. You would have your friends with you singing songs of, maybe a couple jokes would be thrown about you not being a single man no more at whatever age. So let's go back in. Usually the wedding party lasted for a week. New Testament teaching about marriage. Now this is New Testament. The New Testament does not contradict the teachings about marriage in the Old Testament. Most marriage teaching in the New Testament comes from Jesus and the Apostle Paul. Jesus' first miracle occurred in the Cana at Galilee when he and the disciples were attending a wedding. John 2:1-11. Our Lord gave his blessing and sanction on the institution of marriage. On another occasion, when Jesus was asked about a marriage and a divorce, he quoted two passages from Genesis. Have you not read that he who has made them at the beginning, made them male and female, and said, for this reason man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So then they no longer two but one flesh. So then they are no longer two but one flesh. Therefore what God has joined together, let not man separate. Genesis 1:27-2:24, 5:2. Matthew 2:9-4-6. He taught that marriage was joining together of two people so they become one flesh. Not only did God acknowledge the marriage, he also joined the couple. The church at Corinth struggled over a number of issues, including the proper view of marriage. In response to the questions, Paul gave an answer about marriage. From his answer, it seems that three faulty ideas about marriage were prominent among some believers in the church. The first was that marriage was absolutely necessary in order to be a Christian. Another, that celibacy was superior to marriage. The third was that when a person became a Christian, all existing relationships such as marriage were dissolved. When chapter 7 of 1 Corinthians is read with that as a background, the following teaching emerges. First, Paul stated that celibacy is an acceptable lifestyle for a Christian. Not all people need to marry. In fact, Paul declared that he himself preferred not to marry. However, the single life believed for God's glory only if God has given the gift of singlehood. If one does not have the gift, he should marry, and Paul expected most people to marry. Next, Paul spoke to the problem faced by a Christian believer whose spouse did not believe. He reasoned that if the unbelieving partner is willing to live with the Christian, then the Christian should not dissolve that marriage. Remaining with the unbelieving partner could result in his or her salvation. Okay, Corinthians 7:14. In the letter to Ephesians, Paul showed how a marriage relationship can be functioned. First, he said, wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord. So that might make people look, you can take it out of context if you want and say, oh, they're saying the husband's like God, but no, that's not what we're saying. It's basically saying, follow your husband, follow your God, but it'd be the same for husbands. It's one of the 10 Commandments because you have to honor the same arrangement. The model for the wives' submission is the church, which is subject to Christ. Ephesians 5:24. Second, husbands are to love their wives. The role that the husband plays outlined by Jesus Christ, who loved his bride, the church, so much that he died for her. So it ends with saying the Christ bride, the known name for the church of the day. So that's some interesting stuff. First, the ages, the choices, the reasonings behind it. I can see the benefits, especially you gotta look at it like God knows what time the world's in. He knows what other places are doing. So what is wrong with anything? Like, there's no wrong with giving your daughter and then having to compensate the father, and then their daughter getting an inheritance from their new father. Like, what if she marries into a wealthy family? What if she's like 12 years old and she marries into a wealthy family? She's 12 years old and she owes all this livestock, all this horses, all this, and she's a 12-year-old girl. Like, think about it. There would be benefits for both parties, I believe. I'm just saying it works both ways. It's for the male as well. Look what he's giving up too. Like, he has gotta be 13 minimum. That's a lot to bear to anything. So we're gonna look a bit more on the stance of marriage today. Today, all Christian denominations regard marriage as a sacred institution, a covenant. Roman Catholics consider it to be a sacrament. Marriage was officially recognized as a sacrament in 1184 Council of Verona. So before 1184, it wasn't. Before then, no specific ritual was prescribed for celebrating a marriage. Marriage vows did not have to be exchanged in a church. As long as a priest's presence was required, a couple could exchange consent anywhere, anytime. The Catholic Church allowed marriages to take place inside churches only starting in the 16th century. So a lot of that has to be new tradition in church marriage. The Catholic Church teaches that God is the author of sacred institution for marriage. The valid marriage of baptized Christians is one of the Roman Catholic sacraments. Priests are instructed that marriage is part of God's natural law. Today it is common for Roman Catholics to enter into a mixed marriage between a Catholic and a baptized non-Catholic. This is all Catholic. Well, there's a whole thing. Most Protestant denominations hold marriage to be ordained by God for the union between a man and a woman. Many Methodist Christians teach that marriage is God's gift for covenant intended to imitate God's covenant with humankind that Christians enter in their baptism. For example, the rite used in Free Methodist Church proclaims that marriage is more than a legal contract, being bond of a union made in heaven, and into which you enter discreetly and reverently. Okay. Eastern Orthodox marriage is treated as sacred mystery, a sacrament, and an ordination. It serves to unite a woman and man in eternal union before God. Marriage is an icon of the relationship between Jesus and the church. Unlike Western Christianity, Eastern Christians do not consider the sacramental aspect of marriage to be conferred by the couple themselves. Rather, the marriage is conferred by the action of the Holy Spirit acting through the priest. And this talks about sharing the common cup, the transformation of their union, common marriage into a sacred union. Divorce is discouraged sometimes out of a mercy. Marriage may be dissolved if there is no hope for whatsoever in the marriage to fulfill even the semblance of its intended sacramental character. Okay. Has some about a couple other groups, but those are just some traditions of what we had in the past versus what things are looking at now. That was just a short now, but I'm gonna get out of here, and I hope you learned a little something about marriage today in the Bible and in common practice, and peace and blessings.